Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines. It's a special Legal Lines. I have Garret Graves, our congressman. We're talking about the 2016 Great Flood. Garrett's going to talk to us about basically people helping people, the federal government help that you can get via FEMA and the SBA, and also the help that you can get if you have insurance coverage. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Congressman Garret Graves.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a Legal Lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power. And I want you to know if you're injured, Louisiana law grants you a variety of claims to make sure you're fully compensated. It's generally chopped up into several categories, the first being general damages. That's going to compensate you for your mental and physical pain and suffering, your scarring, disability, functional limitations, your loss of enjoyment of life. Also, it will compensate your family, frankly, for your loss of affection. It's called loss of consortium claim. Next category is specific damages. Those would be, say, for example, past and future lost wages, past and future medical expenses. You also have a claim sometimes for what's called punishment damages or punitive damages, typically only available when you're injured by a drunk party. Finally, you're entitled to legal interest from the date you file your lawsuit until you're paid and court costs. So my Legal Lines tip to you from me, Locke Meredith, make sure you know what your claims are.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, welcome. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have back on the show Garret Graves. He is our congressman for the 6th District, and guess what we're going to talk about? Garret,
hey,
it's a pleasure to have you back in. I know you've been on the front lines of all this craziness from the greatest flood in the history of Louisiana. Tell people what you're seeing.
It's really been amazing. I mean, when you hear people say, I've lost everything, I mean, it really means, with the exception of themselves and God, they've lost everything. And
what you said is so valuable, though. We have to keep perspective, because I've flooded at the office and at my home, but my babies are safe, my wife is safe, my family and friends are safe.
Yeah. It definitely puts things in perspective in regard to people recognizing what's truly a priority in their life, and folks recognizing what's truly important. But it is, I mean, it's gut-wrenching to drive around Baton Rouge, to drive around Livingston Parish, Ascension Parish, and see, I mean, it's everything from stuffed animals and kids' toys to family photo albums and computers that, as you know, that's the new photo album, is people's hard drives.
That's right.
And just everything just out there on the street. It's just devastating.
It's one of the greatest tragedies I've actually seen, and I'm part of it, you know, and so I guess maybe it's very, very powerful. You know, we were talking earlier, kind of the hats that you wear as our congressman is our eyes and our ears and our mouth to the public in general out there, particularly the lawmakers at the state, but particularly the federal level. You're cheering us on, and you're also going to go in there and fight for more laws. But right now you're trying to educate folks on what is available, right?
Absolutely. Making sure folks are aware of the different assistance that's available under FEMA, SBA, and different agencies, and just making sure they're aware of that right away. But importantly, as you noted, this is just a really a once-in-a-lifetime type event. And without a doubt, in my opinion, you know, you look at things like 9/11 attacks, you look at things like Hurricane Katrina, you look at things like Hurricane Sandy, you have certain disasters that just cross the line into more of a catastrophic type disaster that require a tailored recovery package. And in my mind, without a doubt, this is one of those instances. You know, Locke, you asked about, you know, what this is like and what we're seeing. You know, the thing about this one is that while the devastation has definitely hit us, it's not over, because now you have these people that are facing six-figure liabilities. And look, I mean, I plan to, you know, to have to repair our car or maybe our AC unit at the house, but I didn't plan to have to replace my home.
Right.
And that is simply financially untenable for the majority of people out there.
Well, and let's point out, 1 out of 8 individuals who've been impacted by this have no insurance at all to cover this, because if you don't have flood insurance, more likely than not, there's no other insurances you have that are going to cover these kind of damages.
No, and look, if you live in the floodplain, you should have insurance. If you live just outside the floodplain, you should have insurance. But when you start talking about 500-year floodplain, 700-year, I mean, look, it's no longer a cost-effective investment at that point, and so you can't expect people to have insurance, flood insurance coverage when you look at how high some of these homes were.
Well, and the bottom line is, we as individuals and the banks and businesses are all impacted by this because we relied on the map provided to us by the federal government that told us and banks and other businesses whether or not you needed to buy flood insurance. And guess what? The map was wrong.
Yeah, well, you know, look, the maps certainly are imperfect, but I think more so, and in regard to what we're talking to our congressional colleagues about, is just helping them understand that, look, this wasn't a regular flood.
Right.
And if your constituents in, you know, New York, Iowa, Nebraska, North Dakota, California, wherever, if they went through something like this, you would want our help in providing them assistance. And so really just trying to put them in our shoes.
Because the bottom line is the state of Louisiana, certainly the Baton Rouge City and the East Baton Rouge Parish and the other 19 parishes, particularly Livingston, they can't handle this on their own. It's impossible. The magnitude of the losses is too great.
It really is incredible. The preliminary estimates in Livingston Parish indicate that 86% of the homes and 91% of the businesses are flooded. Without very aggressive recovery efforts, it would be difficult to have any type of sustainable recovery, or I guess recovery back to pre-flood levels in those areas, which we simply cannot allow these communities to wither. And we're going to have to be successful in getting a recovery package done.
Well, and it's interesting to point out that Livingston was the #1, certainly at least #2, fastest growing parish in the entire state because it had great schools and great community, great businesses. That's where a lot of young families were moving because of those circumstances. They're decimated.
So you have Livingston Parish and Ascension Parish, two of the fastest growing parishes in the state of Louisiana, both pounded. And you even have areas like Zachary and others that were very fast growing, great schools, and also experienced a good deal of flooding.
That's right. I read, 32 inches in Baker and Zachary area, 16 or so here and elsewhere, just amazing quantities.
Yeah. And just to put that in perspective, that is the amount of rain that the average American receives in 1 year. And we received it in a couple of days.
So let's talk about, we said, you know, we want to protect people, #1, and then property to the extent we can. The sources are, if you have an insurance policy, if you don't have insurance, friends and family and loved ones and the Cajun Navy guys and all those folks, you pulled out your kayak, you know, I was in bateaus. And we were helping each other, but that problem has passed now in the sense of saving lives. And so we're looking to the government for those resources that we can access. So let's talk about first the way you get government assistance, the way you start the process. May not get it, but let's talk about it.
Yeah, and Locke, I just want to take a quick step back, and you know, you talked about it. How great are we in our community? Cajun Navy, all these people just stepped up and just, some cases, put themselves at risk and their boats. I know a lot of people just trash their boats out there saving lives. Right. You know, people didn't wait around for shelters to open up. People sheltered in their homes. They opened up their offices. They opened up their Celtic studios. I mean, all these people just opened up shelters wherever they could house people. We didn't wait around for the government to come in and cook. We whipped out our barbecue pits, brought them and congregated in parking lots, pulled whatever we could find in the freezer, and just cooked. And then other people would come dump their freezers on us. I mean, just awesome. And then something else you've seen is people referred to now as the Cajun Army. We didn't wait around for some, you know, FEMA program to come help us gut and demuck our homes. I mean, within days, 90+% of the homes in this area, people had already gone in there and demucked and stripped it. And so it's just amazing what our resilient spirit and what people in this area have done. But you're getting to the point to where we're sort of limiting out on what we can provide for one another, because you literally have probably billions of dollars in repair, rebuilding, and liability that's out there, which really exceeds our capability, while people are being very generous with their property. The reality is now is the time for government. And so, as you noted, FEMA has a program up to $33,000 per person, but as we've seen, the average person so far has only received closer to $3,000, which has been very frustrating. We've been working with FEMA on, but it's important for people to sign up, disasterassistance.gov. Something else is the SBA, the Small Business Administration. A lot of people look at that like a business-related entity, but the reality is they can service individuals as well. If you're a homeowner,
that's important. People need to know that.
They do, and I mean, you think Small Business Administration, you don't think it has anything to do with individuals, but you can apply. Individuals, homeowners can apply for up to a $200,000 low-interest loan, $40,000 loan for renters, and $2 million loan for businesses.
All right, we'll continue this on the next segment with specific detail. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. My very special guest, Congressman Garret Graves, will be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a Legal Lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power, and I want you to know if you're injured, Louisiana law grants you a variety of claims to make sure you're fully compensated. It's generally chopped up into several categories, the first being general damages. That's going to compensate you for your mental and physical pain and suffering, your scarring, disability, functional limitations, your loss of enjoyment of life. Also, it will compensate your family, frankly, for your loss of affection. It's called loss of consortium claim. Next category is specific damages. Those would be, say, for example, past and future lost wages, past and future medical expenses. You also have a claim sometimes for what's called punishment damages or punitive damages, typically only available when you're injured by a drunk party. Finally, you're entitled to legal interest from the date you file your lawsuit until you're paid and court costs. So my Legal Lines tip to you from me, Locke Meredith, make sure you know what your claims are.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. Again, I'm very pleased to have back on the show our Congressman for the 6th District, Garret Graves. Garret, let's dive back in. You know, we're looking to the federal government for help where we don't have insurance or it's not enough or we maybe only had structure, not contents, whatever the circumstances. Everybody hears about FEMA. Let's talk specifically about FEMA. What can FEMA do for you as an individual who are suffering through this?
Well, the most important thing is that people sign up at disasterassistance.gov. They can provide...
And we'll put a banner up, disasterassistance.gov. And I also want to point out to folks, if they go to your website or your Facebook, you have all this information on there. And there's a video that you just did this morning with several mayors of surrounding parishes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, providing more information. A lot of people asking questions about how to access the assistance and what to do with their homes and things like that. So
right.
Trying to provide information, but the FEMA program, it really is designed to address your immediate needs in situations where you need transportation, you may need food, you may need temporary housing, you may need clothes. It's just designed to address those immediate needs, and the assistance is available up to $33,000, but what we've seen so far is that most people have been getting around $3,000.
And how's that, what is the explanation from that you're getting from FEMA? Because I saw that you took a helicopter ride with the guy, Congressman from Florida, yeah. And he evaluated FEMA's response as, quote, pitiful.
Yeah, he's pretty frustrated, and he's certainly seen their response around the country in different disasters. You know, look, it really does seem to be kind of a random game. I think you have a lot of FEMA people that are in from all over the place and probably have different standards and different understanding, and it's like throwing a dart at a wall, unfortunately. So what we've been really urging people to do, appeal.
Right.
If they think they're being treated unjustly, contact our office as well, and we're stepping in with FEMA and trying to help those people out.
And the bottom line is all of these federal systems, whether it's Social Security, disability, all this kind of stuff is set up to make it difficult to get it. It's supposed to be the place to go of last result. It's not there to make you whole, make everything perfect 100%. It's just a helping hand, and it's also made pretty difficult to get a lot of help.
It really is, and unfortunately, you know, sort of the default answer is no, and there's not a lot of clarity as to why some people get it, some people don't. We're trying to enforce transparency on the agency to help people understand why they were rejected. Did they fill out something wrong? Are they ineligible for some reason? And if so, just making sure that the determinations are accurate, which is why, again, we're urging people to appeal those decisions.
Now, I'm hearing that and I haven't fully researched this, but the assistance you get from FEMA is based on income that you earn as an individual, resources you have to yourself as an individual.
You know, Locke, it's one of those things where it depends on who you talk to. Certainly in some of the initial conversations we had with FEMA, they did indicate that was the case. Then later on they came back and very unequivocally told us that it was not a means-tested program. But
I'm sure you're hearing the same stories I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Like folks in mobile home parks get $7,000 checks. Somebody who's lost home, all the cars, standing in line for an hour, 3 hours. Zero.
Yeah. I've heard them over and over again, which is why we've urged people to appeal. We've urged people to reach out to our office so we can engage with FEMA and make sure people are getting accurate answers.
And the way they get to your office is how?
Well, the easiest thing, the phone number is 442-1731. That's in Baton Rouge. 442-1731.
We'll get that up on the banner.
And of course, our website has all of our contact information, which is garretgraves.house.gov, and that's Garret.
And the bottom line is you type in your name, Garret Graves, and all this stuff's going to pop up.
Yep,
Your
yep.
Facebook and your website.
Yeah.
So that's invaluable. So FEMA provides those. Let me ask you, you listed different kind of provisions that they might provide for. Is that $33,000 a cap of all of that, or is that the most cash you can get, plus you get those others?
That is pretty much the most cash you can get. There are other programs that are outside of that, such as the program the governor announced, Shelter at Home, which you can access. It's a separate sign up from the disasterassistance.gov. That's shelterathome.la.gov, shelterathome.la.gov.
That's a big deal.
It is, and I really like the concept behind it. I'm very concerned about the implementation, but Locke, the thing about it is, you think about it, if your home is damaged and you can get FEMA to come in and do $15,000 worth of work getting your house habitable again, just in a rudimentary manner.
Right.
Maybe some basic flooring, get AC, some basic appliances, some bedding, to where you can live in your home again. That is complementary to the long-term recovery of your home. You're back in your home, your neighborhood again.
Safety, security.
Yep. And so I think it's really important. And the main reason I like it is it gets you back in your community again, and it helps to defray your expenses and complementary to long-term recovery.
Well, and we're not going to have these trailers sitting around for 10 or 15 years later like we see in Hammond on the interstate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I will tell you, I'm a little bit worried about how they're administering it. I'm worried that while they're saying they're going to limit it to $15,000 per house, by the time they take out all the administrative costs, they're only going to have half the money left. And I really want to maximize the efficiency there. We're talking to the state about giving some of the do-it-yourselfers access to materials and say, look, give them pre-approval to get access to $15,000 in certain materials like sheetrock that we know people are going to need to recover their homes.
So is FEMA requiring to get this type of program that you use a third-party contractor to do the work, or can you do it individually?
The way that it's set up now is, as I appreciate, they have an overall program management contractor. They've hired 7 general contractors, and then they're going to have numerous subcontractors under that. So you sign up for the program, They come out to your house and do the work. I'm just really worried about the efficiency of it. If they can be able to do it fast enough, are they, again, going to end up taking some of the dollars off and burning it through administrative costs as opposed to actually getting it on improving
Well, nobody's going to be
homes.
more efficient and quick as the homeowner who wants to get back in their home.
And look, let's be honest, just like we saw with Cajun Navy, chefs, shelters.
We get it done.
We do, and you have a lot of people here who are really good do-it-yourselfers.
It makes a lot of sense, and it's the alternative of having to go live in a little bitty old trailer with your family on somebody's land somewhere if it doesn't flood. I mean, based on this event, about near everywhere floods.
Yeah. So there's some real advantages to this program if it can be implemented the right way.
And as I understand the FEMA process, do they come out and do an inspection of the home?
They do. They will come out and do an inspection of your home. That's part of the approval process for different assistance needs that you may have. It also is required in order for you to have what they're now calling manufactured housing units, which I think is a new term for
instead of trailers,
the new version of the trailers, which I will say I've gone in them. They're much more spacious. They're designed for longer living periods. But Locke, just going back to frustrations, as I understand some of those units, it's going to cost FEMA $100,000 by the time they build them, transport them, get them set up, and get them back out of there. Think about that for just a minute.
For one?
For one. Think about that for just a minute. If FEMA would come in and say, look, we'll either set up a trailer on your property, or what you're going to end up incurring, they'll incur $100,000, or we'll give you $80,000 to get your house fixed up. I mean, government
it's over 7 times cheaper to give somebody $15,000.
Yeah, government saves money. You get money that's complementary to your long-term recovery. So, look, these are some of the things we're working on. We've got to get government's head out of the sand and do things that are much more complementary to long-term recovery.
So go to that website, fill out the application. An inspector is supposed to set up an appointment within 10 days. He comes out and inspects your home. That's supposed to occur relatively quickly, and within 10 days after the inspection, he's supposed to give you a decision. Is that the way it goes down?
Give you a decision, and then you also need an inspection for the manufactured housing units to be put on your property to make sure that they can put it in an area that's not going to flood, make sure you have the right utilities and hookups and space and in compliance with local ordinances and things like that.
And then, assuming you get approval, you get a check shortly thereafter in an amount they decide arbitrarily, it seems.
It does.
Okay, we'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith of Legal Lines. My special guest, our Congressman Garret Graves. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Document your claim. What do I mean? Whenever you present a claim, whether it's for injuries in an automobile collision or for a breach of contract case or a business claim, it all boils down to documentation and evidence. For example, when you go to trial, basically both sides are presenting their evidence of what they believe to be their case. For example, also, if you're involved in an automobile collision, document the event. Talk to all the parties who are involved. Get their names, address, contact information, insurance info. Talk to the witnesses on the scene. Also get their contact information. Take photographs. With the phones we all have these days, everybody can take a picture and that paints 1,000 words. So document your claim. The Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is document the claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, very pleased to have back on the show our Congressman for the 6th District, Garret Graves. Garret, let's dive back in. We've talked about FEMA. Let's talk about the other governmental program that most folks seem to be using, and that's the Small Business Administration. Explain to folks, please.
Sure. So a lot of people, when you hear Small Business Administration, you think it's something that's only available for businesses. The reality is that if you're a homeowner, if you're a renter, you are also eligible for SBA assistance.
That's a big deal.
It really is. You can go to sba.gov/disaster. You can sign up and apply for a loan. Just because you apply doesn't mean you have to take it, but property owners, just homeowners, are eligible for up to $200,000 low interest loan in the range, as I understand, of around 1.7%, so significantly lower than what people are paying. And in some cases, you can actually even take portions of your mortgage and roll them over into this and save money that way. If you are a renter, you're eligible for up to $40,000 in low interest loans available through the SBA.
So bottom line is FEMA is I get something for free in essence. Small Business Administration is available to individuals and businesses, but it's in the form of a loan, but a low interest loan.
Low interest loan.
What is the cap for businesses?
For businesses, it's a little bit different in that the interest rate's a little bit higher, as interest rates are in the commercial sector. It's a little bit interest rate's a little bit closer to, as I appreciate, perhaps around 4%. But the cap on a loan for a business is about $2 million. So significantly higher than it.
And are the loans unsecured, or do they require security?
They're backed by the SBA. They're unsecured loans, and they determine your eligibility.
And what is the criteria that they use to determine eligibility?
Well, from what I understand, it really goes back to your need, and it goes back to largely what it is that you need funds for. And so there is some relationship between the FEMA assistance and the SBA assistance. If they determine that folks' needs aren't urgent and imminent through the FEMA process, then they will kick you over to the SBA and urge you to go through that process. But again, I would just urge appeal the FEMA process and certainly apply for SBA.
So bottom line is apply for both FEMA and SBA and appeal denials. And there are multiple different programs that you may have access to by denial in one particular aspect. Is that right?
That it is, correct.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit, because we talked about how you're disseminating this information, how you can find it out by going to your website or your Facebook. You also have Twitter, and that stuff's invaluable. You got everything there. You just had the interview with all the mayors that was an hour long at least discussing this. Let's talk about what you're going to do when you have on your congressman hat in that crazy place up there in Washington.
Well, Locke, as you know, this disaster unfortunately has not gotten a lot of national media attention. And so
it's amazing.
We're going to start from a setback. I mean, we're going to start from a deficit without a doubt, because
wow, I didn't even think about that. You have to educate all
absolutely.
those guys.
We do. In fact, we had a big conference call, and I'm going to guess we had 200 members of Congress on last week and talk about all sorts of other things. And I said, look, I just got to bring your attention to something, and started talking about what was going on here. I said, you don't realize what's happening, but this is happening here. And I started explaining to him all the flooding and how devastating it was. We have been able to bring a key member of Congress down from Florida, showed him around a little bit. In several days, we're bringing another group of members of Congress down, Republicans and Democrats, to show them around. We're really going to have to educate people first, but I think you've got three really immediate needs. The first one is that we've got to bolster this whole housing shelter type program and make it make more sense. If FEMA's willing to spend $100,000 for a trailer in someone's yard, why would you not give them half that to fix up their home in something that makes so much more sense instead of limiting them to $15,000 or something?
And still help two people instead of one?
Absolutely. So that's one thing we're looking at. Number two is, as you know, people within the floodplain are being required to elevate their homes if they have experienced significant damage, which could be 40 or 50% of the value of their home. In that case, we're trying to flip that whole paradigm over. I think it's insane when you look at the cost of elevating a home, in some cases in excess of $100,000. And keep in mind, this is on top of replacing your cars, your wardrobe, your appliances, repairing your home, and all the other expenses that people are incurring. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to build better flood and drainage projects. Therefore, you can actually lower the base flood elevation and negate the requirement for these people to have to elevate their homes at all.
And that leads to the Comate Diversion Canal, right?
Comate Diversion Project that needs to be a more robust project than the one currently on the books. A Amite River Basin component, which is in the lower basin, helping out areas like Bayou Manchac, Alligator Bayou, and some of the other areas, even over on the east side of the Amite River.
What does that look like? Dredging it so that there's better flow?
Well, you have channels that exist like Bayou Manchac now that you could dredge out and you could provide pump capacity to the Mississippi River. Therefore, you're pulling water out of the Amite River, similar to what the Comate project is designed to do, pulling water out of the Comate and siphoning it over to the Mississippi River, therefore putting more capacity in both of those rivers. But importantly, in areas like Bayou Manchac now, we're seeing all that water just being held. You've got to have more capabilities or tools to be able to handle where the water goes and where it doesn't go, which means more pumps, more canals, and more capabilities.
Now, I've also read articles about the new interstate that was kind of created there, more lanes and such in Livingston, and there wasn't proper drainage. Is that legitimate?
It appears like it is. I've seen some of the pictures showing a 5 or 6 foot differential in the height of the water on the north side of the freeway, the interstate, versus the south side. It did appear to hold back water. As I understand, the work that was done at Range Road and Walker and these other exits does comply with federal standards, and which apparently requires a 50-year and 100-year, depending on the components, flood standard. But clearly, based on the pictures, it looks like it contributed to flooding in this area. But if I can just add one other component that I think is really important for what we're advocating for in Washington is just that unmet needs component, Locke. You have people that have hundreds of thousands of dollars in liability to rebuild their home, to get cars, to get clothes, and to try to get back on their feet again. And I think that this is a situation where Congress needs to step in and provide some assistance to homeowners and businesses, rental properties and others, to get these things, get people back on their feet.
And that would be similar to what happened with Hurricane Katrina and the Road Home type legislation?
There was a program, Road Home, which I think it needs to be very different than Road Home, but it was an example of a program that provided additional assistance. There was additional assistance provided after Hurricane Sandy and other instances, and I think that's a really important immediate component as
Garret,
well.
how do you make these various items happen? Because, I mean, do they require legislation and then approval by the president, or can these be agency rules being modified and changed? How does that go down?
There's some minor flexibility within the agencies. This is going to take legislation, and so normally the way this works is that the White House will first request some type of emergency appropriations. We then would shape that and then pass it through the House and the Senate. We're waiting for some requests to come in, and I'm very confident we're going to be changing whatever it is that comes in and trying to improve that and tailor it more to this situation. But look, people are facing these financial decisions right now, and so we've got to give them more clarity and get some assistance to them now to where they have viable options.
One other thing, let's discuss the fact that there's been some tax movement on behalf of folks and the profit sharing plans. Bottom line is you can write off losses not covered by insurance in 2015 or 2016, and you may have access to loans or maybe even payments from your profit sharing plans?
You do, through profit sharing, through some of your retirement accounts. However, right now, as I understand, IRS still would penalize that withdrawal. And look, let's also keep in mind, while I think we need to give people the flexibility, it's important to keep in mind that if you take all your money out of your retirement account, you're just kicking the can down the road. And so that's why I think we need this unmet needs component.
Garret, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I very much appreciate you doing the show. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines. My special guest, our Congressman, Garret Graves. Thank you for being with us.